I don't really care what she says.
You're not too fat to wear a thong.
You think I'm fat? What are you talking about? What am I? You wanna go?
Get hot girls to wrestle on command. Up in the ring or down in the mud, it's Rumble Roses, and it plays as good as it looks. Rated M for mature, from Konami.
Man, do I love the 2000s. Lately I've been going through the I wonder what this game's about phase. For context, me and wrestling have a pretty interesting relationship, if you can call it that. Back when I used to live in a 3-tower apartment complex in the early 2010s, I used to hang around with my cousins a lot, who lived several floors above me. If we weren't playing outside with the other kids of that community, we spent a lot of our time playing video games at their place. Their Nintendo Wii was our greatest way of bonding with each other. We sunk in so many hours of Super Smash Bros. Brawl and Wii Sports Resort being some of the only few games we really had. But we'd also rent out some stuff from our local Redbox like Cars 2, the video game, and Monsters vs. Aliens? Yeah, our Redbox selection sucked. But anyways, we didn't get anything too substantial until my younger cousin got a PSP, and the first game he got for it was WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, a game that we not only both enjoyed but ended up introducing both of us to the world of wrestling, more specifically the WWE. And that program for so long became the thing that we'd always come over to each other's houses to watch together. Whether it was Monday Night Raw on Channel USA or Friday Night SmackDown on the Sci-Fi Channel, we'd always have a great time watching WWE and playing SmackDown vs. Raw 2011 together. Hell, Cena going at it against Rock in WrestleMania 28 back in 2012 was the hype train for all of us kids in the family, and was the talk of the whole school I used to go to back then. But speaking of 2012, that was also the year I moved away from the previous town I used to live in into the one that I'm currently in right now. And after that, I just kinda stopped watching. I think it was a combination of wrestling being a hobby I more so enjoyed with my cousins, and the fact that anime was taking over the majority of my interests at that point forward. But either way, I just wasn't really keeping up with wrestling as much anymore. It wasn't until the past WrestleMania 40, a few months ago by the recording of this video, that my interest in wrestling reignited. So much so that I ended up watching some compilations of past stories between wrestlers feuding with each other, mostly from the Attitude Era and especially Ruthless Aggression Era, which helped invigorate my love for wrestling even more. This all got to the point where I started thinking to myself, man, are there any good wrestling games out there right now? Because the WWE games as they went on never really caught my interest anymore, especially when they started attaching the 2K name to the brand. And considering the reactions of many fans who bought these titles over the years, it doesn't look like I'm missing out on much. It wasn't until I unlocked a memory in my head of my uncle lending me his Xbox 360 when I was in my early middle school years, over a decade ago. The thing I did the most on it was download a bunch of demos of games I never got to try out before, like Jet Set Radio and Sonic Adventure 2. Then I remembered there was a demo of a wrestling game that I was playing that I remembered liking. A game that made me double check to make sure my parents weren't around, no less. And that was Rumble Roses XX. It was an all-female wrestling game that I've never heard of beforehand that was really fun from the small bits I played of the demo. It had everything from satisfying in-ring action to smoking hot chicks. That checks about everything off the list for a teenage boy, am I right? But as I said before, it wasn't my console, so I eventually had to give it back. Fast forward to this year, 2024, where I'm lucky to have my gaming PC, which allows me to play a lot of older titles that I otherwise couldn't play, through very swashbuckling means, I'll say. In addition to wanting to play more old school games recently, and the fact that I was looking for a wrestling game to get into, this is where I got the idea to revisit Rumble Roses after a long time, with the very first entry on PS2. With all that being said, to quote a legendary superstar, it's time to play the game.
Take a look, yeah? Whoa! She's beautiful. I'm talking about a Yankee Rose. Ooh, and she looks wild. Wild. Are you ready for the...
Wow. This game's definitely got some style to it, I'll give it that. Anyway, these games were developed by Studio Ukes. the primary developers behind all the WWE games from the year 2000 all the way to 2018. During one of their off periods, Konami approached these guys to develop an all-female wrestling game with all the style and personality Konami titles possessed back in the early to mid 2000s. Which is good for Yuke, since in interviews they stated that for a long time at that point they wanted to experiment and see how visually appealing they could make the model of a female character look. To say that they well over succeeded in that aspect is pretty much an understatement. But regardless, for a studio at that time that's mainly been doing realistic licensed wrestling games year after year, I can imagine Yuke seeing this as an opportunity to really creatively express themselves. So Rumble Roses eventually came out in 2004, exclusively on the PlayStation 2. Upon going past the title screen, you're greeted with a couple modes to start. When picking my character and heading into a normal exhibition match, there's something I immediately noticed. Aside from Reiko's butt, there's no tutorial in this game. Apparently there is in the Japanese version of the game, but for some reason that along with a couple other features were completely removed for the North American and UK releases of this game. So I essentially had to learn as I play. While this did take more ass beatings than I'm willing to admit, I thankfully did get a firm grasp on the gameplay for the most part not too long after. So basically, you have a button for regular strike attacks, a button for grappling attacks, a button for dashing on the ground, the right shoulder button for guarding against strike attacks, and a button for supplementary actions, such as pinning your opponent when they're on the ground or hopping out of the ring. Depending on which direction you hold the stick, you can do different strike attacks or grappling attacks, the latter of which you'll be doing the most. You can also perform grappling attacks to grounded opponents depending if you grab them from the higher or lower half of their body. There's even additional grappling attacks if your opponent is against a turnbuckle or the ropes. Every character also has the ability to do submission attacks where they place one of the limbs of the opponent into a lock, with a time meter showing up telling them how much time they have to mash buttons for the required count before they're forced to tap out of the match. The more that limb is injured, the less time you'll have if you end up getting caught in another submission attack. When your opponent's on the offensive, you have the option of reversing their attacks by perfectly timing both the right shoulder button and the corresponding attack button that said opponent is doing to you, whether it's the strike or grappling button. As strict as that might sound, the window of opportunity is so large that I ended up successfully doing reversals 90% of the time just by mashing the shoulder and attack buttons. So much to where reversals felt a little too easy to pull off for both you and especially the CPU, as you might find yourself doing back-to-back reversals with your opponent over and over again in a row, and it's quite humorous to watch sometimes. Having the general control scheme down and now being able to comfortably jump in and out of matches, I gotta say, this game kinda rocks! In terms of characters, I mainly stuck to Reiko Hinamoto since she's my favorite, and Candy Cane since I totally dig her punk girl presence. And after playing a lot of matches, it was really cool doing a lot of these sweet grappling attacks, hammer throwing my opponent against the turnbuckle or the ropes, and even taking the fight outside of the ring and duking it out on the ground. What helps heighten this is the visual fidelity. For a PlayStation 2 game that was released in 2004, graphically, this game looks fantastic with many of its visual aspects still holding up today. And you can see a lot of that through the character entrance sequences. The character models are expertly designed and are still so great to look at to this day. And they didn't skip a beat when it comes to the animation either. The animation of a character simply walking to the arena just is so seamless to look at, in more ways than one I'll add. Let alone the entrance sequences of all the other characters in the game. You can tell, these developers were putting their all in regards to passion and effort to have these characters simulate as much realism as possible in the animation, while also adding their own twist to increase the entertainment value. You can tell they were also trying to pay homage to female Japanese wrestling culture, or in other words, Joshi. This game is just a spectacle to look at, and this is consistent with the gameplay. All the girls look great in action, and what helps is the locked camera angles as they do their grappling attacks. You actively wince at some of the things that these girls do to each other, while also sometimes wondering if you need a change of shorts. They also control really well too, with all the characters feeling like they have proper weight to them when they move and do their attacks. Every attack you do builds up a meter at the top of the screen. When you fill it up once, you'll have the opportunity to do one of 3 types of finishing moves. A killing move, which just requires you to be near a standing opponent, and a lethal move, which has conditions in regards to your current position, such as being on top of a turnpike with your opponent lying on the ground, or you running up to your opponent. Both can be activated by using the left shoulder button. The third finishing move is a little more complicated. There's certain grappling attacks you can do that are capable of building up a heart-shaped icon under the opponent's meter. Once filled up, they're put into what the game calls a humiliation state, where the girls do this. And if you have at least 1 bar of meter filled up, you'll be able to do a humiliation move with the left trigger button, which are pretty much the ultimate skills of all the characters. I'm guessing the idea is to unleash the most painfully devastating attack possible while also humiliating your opponent in the process. Yeah, this game's nuts, man. I do want to mention that if your opponent is pinning you on the ground, you can kick out of it by simply mashing buttons. But if you're hit with a finisher attack that isn't a submission type and you're pinned directly after, it's incredibly hard to kick out of those, which I'm sure is what the developers intended. But the weird part is, from my experiences, even when my character was hardly damaged at all during a match, and I ended up getting hit with a finisher move from my opponent, it was next to impossible for me to kick myself out of being pinned. No matter how hard I mashed, no joke. There were times where I spent up to 6 minutes of a match roughing up my opponent with barely any damage done to myself, only for my opponent to suddenly land a finishing move on me, and then I lost. Crazy. But anyway, if you feel like tensing up the fight, you can leave the ring and go to any of the 4 edges of the arena and pick up a weapon, ranging from a hand brace to a baseball bat to a finger pointer to tickle girls? Okay. Is that a whip? What? Oh shoot! The game is apparently operating on the same engine as WWE SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, and while I unfortunately can't make any comparisons to that or any wrestling games at all for the matter due to my lack of experiences with those games, I can say that overall, the gameplay of Rumble Roses is some pretty high caliber stuff. The wrestling action in this game is really fun to engage with, along with the stunning visuals, and that's on top of being greeted with the eye candy that are these beautiful women. The fact that Koei Tecmo never went to Konami or vice versa to have this game collab with Dead or Alive is insane to me. Nonetheless, I can easily see this game being played by best friends and close siblings among many households back in the day. Now, getting into the other key aspect of this game, I gotta say I came into this with the lowest expectations, but ended up coming out a little bit surprised. This game's got a story mode, folks. The amount of fighting games I know that have worthwhile story modes are less than a handful. You're here for the gameplay, and they know that, which is why story modes are usually left as an afterthought by these developers. And for a game as quirky as this, there is no reason for me to assume any different. Either way, once you go back to the main menu and select the story mode, you're able to select any of the unlocked characters and begin the story from their perspective. There's no actual canon plotline to my knowledge, as the ending of the story is determined by what character you picked. I'll mainly talk about Reiko's story since she's the star of the game, and do a quick summary of every other relevant character. No biases in sight. The Rumble Rose is a popular tournament among all female fighters in the globe. Reiko Hinamoto is an underdog wrestler who joined the Rumble Rose out of the passion for the sport and to look for her sister Fujiko, who disappeared shortly after their mother passed away. Their mother was Kamikaze Rose, a legendary wrestler in the industry who died due to a mishap in the ring, and Reiko wants to live up to her name and be the best in the world. For some reason, they never even show you a picture of what Kamikaze Rose looks like. I think that would have improved things here. After you win your first match, she then comes across a mysterious person by the name of Evil Rose, who runs off with a migraine after telling Reiko to leave the Rumble Rose, leaving Reiko confused and wondering if Evil Rose is who she thinks she is. Gee, I wonder. After that is your mandatory mud match, where the famous pop star Aisha is Reiko's next opponent. Even after Reiko gushes to her about being a big fan of her music, Aisha decides to give Reiko an attitude in return. And after swiftly humbling that chick, Reiko made a new friend in Makoto Aihara, the judo babe, who's super psyched to fight with her. Afterwards, Reiko has her match with Anesthesia, the totally not villain of this game. As soon as she gets her butt handed to her by Reiko, she decides to take all of her salty frustrations and attack her from behind. Wouldn't we all love to do some version of that? Only for Reiko to be saved by Evil Rose dropping into the fray, telling Reiko yet again to leave the tournament, leaving Reiko wondering yet again if Evil Rose is truly the identity of her sister Fujiko. They really insist on playing this out, aren't they? Anyway, then comes the next main event, being Reiko going at it against the 3-count cowgirl, Dixie Clements. These two are essentially the poster girls of this franchise, since both of them take up most of the spotlight in the CGI intro of this game, and are both featured on the covers of both games in the series. They're rivals to boot. And honestly, even though I think this could have been expanded upon a bit more, I think the game does a good job in making their rivalry believable. It's cool to see them fight. So after Reiko wins, she earns the blessing and respect of Dixie, while also insisting that this is only the start of their rivalry. When Dixie leaves, right behind Reiko is a very hostile Makoto Aihara, ready to kill her on the spot and putting Reiko on edge. After taking Makoto down, it's revealed that Anesthesia is a scientist who's been manipulating various wrestlers and causing them to go corrupt as a result for the simple pleasure of furthering her own research. search. Evil Rose shows up and warns Reiko to leave one last time, with Reiko trying hard to reach out to her long-lost sister Fujiko, which forces Evil Rose to try and take matters into her own hands and force Reiko out herself. When that fails, Anesthesia shows up and informs both of them that Reiko will be facing Anestesia's newest creation, Lady X, who is implied was Reiko's actual mom, but in reality, Anesthesia just took the DNA of Kamikaze Rose and injected it into Lady X. The fight against Lady X wasn't too bad, but it wasn't until the second fight, when it came out with the cybernetic body, that things got intense. For starters, all of her attacks do heavier damage than mine, and her finisher meter charges at a faster rate. You get hit with one of those things and you're out like a light! I was kinda getting my ass kicked a few times here. It wasn't until I remembered that you can actually pick out weapons during these matches at the edges of the arena. So I got out the hand brace and found out that you can actually cheese this boss fight by repeatedly clocking in the face with the brace. It does a lot of damage and fills up my finisher meter at a faster rate so I can land the final blow and win the match. But once that's done, Reiko gives her fake mother the passionate beatdown, dedicating all of it for avenging Makoto Aihara, Fujiko, and her mother. Anestesia's pissed and Evil Rose watches in awe, then disappears, with Reiko wondering if she'll ever see her sister again. And that's pretty much the end of it. Practically every other character story is structured the same way. Dixie Clements is here is because she's a longtime fan of Kamikaze Rose and has her eyes set out on reigning victory over the last of her bloodline, Reiko. Aisha wants to settle her superiority complex that she had with Dixie from high school. Aigo wants to prove her strength to all the family members of her tribe, and Makoto Aihara is a martial artist who followed Aigo to wrestling because she was the only one who beat her during their time in judo. Candy Cane dropped out of high school, but then you find out the real reason she's here is to get the prize money to save her childhood orphanage from closing down. And Miss Spencer is her teacher who personally came here to drag Candy Cane back to school. Bloody Shadow's a ninja who was sent from the Japanese government to investigate the behind closed door schemes of the Rumble Rose tournament. And Fujiko disappeared on Reiko to investigate the death of their mother, but had her memories manipulated by Anesthesia and turned to Evil Rose. Yeah, Anestesia's pretty much the villain in all of these scenarios, and you gotta fight Lady X at the end of every character story. What also will catch your attention is the voice acting.
I knew something wasn't right.
Go home, Ray. Go. Oh!
Wait, why should you give a damn? No, it can't be. Whoa, slow down there.
You'll find out soon enough. I'm not just some chick to be dismissed.
Yeah, it's laughably bad, but I'm not gonna lie, there is some charm here. But aside from that, while nothing here really had me super invested, I was genuinely surprised by how enjoyable the story was. It's not striving to be anything grand, but you do get a sense that the writers put a lot of heart into this, especially with some of the character interactions. To put a clearer perspective on this, for a while now, I was looking for an anime to watch that was about females wrestling that also gave similar story beats to something like the WWE. I thought I found one with the anime titled Wanna Be the Strongest in the World, but in a long story short, this show didn't really give me what I was asking for. Rumble Rose's story, on the other hand, is pretty much what I've been looking for in that regard. It felt like this game was the start of a lore that could potentially be really good in the future. It's got a lot of that 2000s energy, and I'm all for it. The only thing that kinda sucks about the story mode is that you can't save mid-playthrough. You can save after you finish your run, but if you say gotta run an errand outside real quick during a playthrough and turn the game off, you gotta start the story all over again. Luckily, none of these are too long to begin with, but come on, that's lame. Anyway, after beating the story with the girl of your choice, you unlock their swimsuits where you can try them on in regular matches and... Whoa. This is... Oh boy. I'm fine, just had a moment. Anyway, now back to the cake. I mean game. You can do mad mud matches, which are pretty much the same as regular matches, just with a bunch of mud everywhere. I didn't really do these that much, but I will say, it is amusing seeing two chicks playing dirty with each other. Then there are also title matches, which start with a lot of the characters locked from selection. This is where the face and heel system comes in, to where if the cursor slides to the opposite side of this meter of your default character, you'll unlock the opposite persona of that character. Yes, I said opposite, because if you look at the character selection screen, you'll see that it looks like there's 22 characters to pick from. Sounds awesome, right?
The answer's yes and no.
Gotta put the air quotes on 22 because yes, while there are technically 22 playable characters in the game, 11 of them are just face or heel opposites of the other character. To unlock the other persona of that character, you need to select vows to accomplish before entering a match. Vows are basically conditions like not dashing in a match, not picking up weapons, successfully landing a lethal attack, etc. Keep in mind that if you end up switching from face to heel or vice versa, you are stuck with that version of the character with the other locked until you repeat the vow process for the other side. I didn't end up switching too many of the characters anyway. You can keep your rowdy Reikos, regular Reiko is more than enough for me, and Candy Cane is so much cooler than what they tried to do with Becky. Only characters I switched were Aisha to Showbiz, because reasons, and Miss Spencer to Mistress Spencer, because reasons. Once you accumulate enough vow points to 100% on whichever side of the meter, then that character becomes eligible for a shot at the championship title. Win that title and you unlock the gallery for that character. The gallery mode is pretty much a viewing mode where you can check out the profile for the character, hear some voice clips and whatnot, and you can pan the camera around your selected character to get a real good look at them. If you manage to defend your title in a match, you can even unlock a beach setting to view your character in the gallery mode and even try out different outfits in the... Alright guys, in all seriousness, even though there's not much to do here, you can tell I had a lot of fun in this mode. Fun fact, if you enter the gallery mode without pressing anything for around a minute, you'll actually get to hear an interview with the characters. Like their favorite colors, what they do outside of wrestling, their favorite foods, and their type in... guys?
I like smart guys. You know, the kind who wear glasses and act shy, but are sweet, deep down inside.
Interesting. But yeah, I'd say this mode is pretty cool. As for the soundtrack of this game, there's not too much to talk about here, outside of the entrance themes, all of which are enjoyable enough, but there's only a few here that I really liked, such as Reiko's theme, Look at the Sky, Candy Cane's theme, Have Some Fun, Bloody Shadow's theme, The Shadow Appears, and Dixie's theme, Yankee Rose. The crazy part about that song is that I had no idea that this was a cover of a pre-existing song. My artist was the one who pointed that out to me while we were chatting one day since he's a fan of 80s rock music. Even linked me to the original Yankee Rose song by David Lee Roth, and it's a great listen, which made me appreciate this game's version of the song by Teresa James even more. With all that being said, that just about ends it for this game. Coming from a guy who hasn't played or had interest in a wrestling game in over a decade, I really enjoyed my time here. Many people unfortunately might write this game off as just erotic material, but there genuinely is a good game here with great mechanics. And while I definitely won't say that it's anywhere among the best in the genre, it does have a level of uniqueness that separates it from the crowd of games like it. Going back to what I said early on, it really is unfortunate how niche this series is, because I would have loved to see Reiko and Dixie as guest characters in Dead or Alive. You know how cool it'd be to see Dixie going at it against Tina Armstrong in that game? It'd be nuts! I guess I'm just glad that this game sold well enough to get at least one sequel. As for whether or not I talk about Rumble Rose's Double X, depends on if I ever get an Xbox console in the future. Since we're not going to be seeing re-releases for either of these games anytime soon, I'll tell you that, which is a shame. But it is what it is. Anyways, if you're looking for some decent fun for yourself or even a group of friends for some couch play, I'd say go find any means to get a hold of this game. Konami's got a lot of legendary franchises out there, and I'd say Rumble Roses deserves to be remembered. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day. Laters.